The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors have been proudly serving the people of this community since 1918. Service is our motto. The poor, the rich, the middle class and all are given the best of care and attention at all times. You have the privilege to select what you want. In your time of need, contact the capable, the competent, and the dependable staff of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home who is genuinely concerned with your care. At J.W. Williams Funeral Home, you are aptly served by the proprietor president, Deacon Arthur L. Parker, who continues the traditions and values set forth by the past president, Dr. Napoleon Williams. Your announcers for the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Sunday morning program are Deacon Arthur L. Parker, Reverend Isaac H. Owens, Mrs. Calandra Wilkerson Parker, Minister Frankie Harmon, Miss Sandra Johnson, and Deacon Earl Clark, Jr.
Oh God, our gracious Heavenly Father, we come on this Easter morning thanking Thee for revealing to us the ultimate meaning and the ultimate rationality of the universe. We thank You this morning for Your Son, Jesus, who came by to let us know that love is the most durable power in the world, who came by to let us know that death can't defeat us, to take the sting out of the grave and death and make it possible for all of us to have eternal life. We thank You, oh God, and God grant that we will be grateful recipients of Thy eternal blessings. In the name and spirit of Jesus we pray. Amen. This prayer of praise to our Heavenly Father, as prayed by civil rights leader, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., is offered for each of us on this Easter Sunday morning by the President, CEO, management, and staff of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Happy Easter, happy Resurrection Day. He is risen, He is alive, and He is well.
Thank you, and good morning, friends. We come to you this blessed Easter Sunday morning to bring to you announcements, dedications, and songs. We certainly hope that your day may be brighter after listening to our program. The family of beloved retired educator Mrs. Gladys Harris Foster of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Joe Lewis Farm of Elko, Georgia. The family of Deacon Samuel Mills of McDonald, Georgia. The family of Miss Kavisa Yvette Davis of Americus, Georgia. The family of Mr. Leroy Mitchell of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Calvin Lamar Glenn of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Jamie Lee Collins of Jacksonville, Florida, and Cordele, Georgia, would like to thank their many friends for the food, the flowers, the condolences, and all other expressions of sympathy and kindness shown to them during their hours of sorrow and bereavement during the past week. Retired educator Mrs. Gladys Harris Foster, age 98, of 402 West 1st Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Monday, April 4th, at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for beloved retired educator Mrs. Gladys Harris Foster, age 98, was held Sunday, April 10th, at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Portico in Cordele, Georgia. Her pastor, the Reverend Isaac H. Owen, pastor of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, officiated. The burial followed at the Westview Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include a loving and devoted son, Mr. Wayne S. Foster of Warwick, Georgia, two beloved grandsons, Mr. Sean McManus and his wife, Mrs. Akia McManus, and Mr. Cameron Wilcock and his wife, Mrs. Haley Wilcock of Fitzgerald, Georgia. Two beloved great-grandchildren, Miles McManus and Raleigh Wilcock. A beloved daughter-in-law, Mrs. Elizabeth Wilcock Foster of Fitzgerald, Georgia. A beloved brother-in-law, Deacon James A. Smith of Cordele, Georgia. 10 beloved nieces, 8 nephews, many grandnieces and grandnephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survived. Beloved retired educator, Mrs. Gladys Harris Foster, age 98, of 402 West 1st Avenue, Cordele, Georgia. Mr. Joe Lewis Farm, age 73, of 3207 Highway 41, Elko, Georgia, died Friday, April 1st, at the Houston Medical Center in Warner Robins, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Joe Lewis Farm, age 73, was held Sunday, April 10th, graveside at the Spring Hill Cemetery in Elko, Georgia. The Reverend Isaac H. Owens, pastor of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, officiated. Survivors include his loving and devoted sisters, Mrs. Charlie Mae Whitfield of Elko, Georgia, and Mrs. Maddie Mae Flew Ellen of Orlando, Florida. A host of devoted nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survived. Mr. Joe Lewis Farm, age 73, of 3207 Highway 41, Elko, Georgia. Deacon Samuel Mills, age 81, of McDonald, Georgia, died Sunday, April 3rd, at the Piedmont Henry Hospital in Stockbridge, Georgia. The funeral service for Deacon Samuel Mills, age 81, was held Monday, April 11th, on the grounds of his beloved Spring Hill Baptist Church in Tippettville, Georgia. The pastor, Reverend Charles Cobb Sr., officiated. The burial followed in the churchyard cemetery. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Martha Denard Mills of McDonald, Georgia. His beloved and caring son, Mr. Myron Mills, and his wife, Mrs. Valencia Mills of Bogart, Georgia. And Mr. Patrick Mills and his wife, Mrs. Tanya Mills of McDonald, Georgia. 3 beloved grandchildren, Mr. K. Mills and his wife, Mrs. Samantha Mills, Mr. Bryson Mills, and Mrs. Agret Mills. His loving and devoted sisters, Mrs. Emma May King of Atlanta, Georgia, Mrs. Sarah Kate McDonald of Dade City, Florida, and Mrs. Bernice Green of Winters Haven, Florida. His devoted brothers, Mr. Arthur McDonald and his wife, Mrs. Gloria McDonald of Clarksville, Tennessee, Mr. Willie McDonald and his wife, Mrs. Marilyn McDonald of San Antonio, Texas, and Mr. Willie Whitsett of Hilton, Georgia. His beloved aunt, Mrs. Ella Mae Pinkney of Riviera Beach, Florida, and Mrs. Willie Bell Lawson of Pitts, Georgia. Mrs. Otha D. Stubbins of Greenville, South Carolina. A host of devoted nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many sorrowing friends survive. Deacon Samuel Mills, age 81, of McDonald, Georgia. Miss Calvisa Wybette Davis, age 42, of 105 Peachtree Street, Americus, Georgia, died Wednesday, April 6th, at the Phoebe Sumter Medical Center in Americus, Georgia. The funeral service for Miss Calvisa Wybette Davis, age 42, was held Tuesday, April 12th, in the sanctuary of the Friendship Baptist Church in Americus, Georgia. The pastor, Bishop Melvin McCluster, officiated. Bishop Holloman Harvey Sr. delivered the eulogy. The burial followed at Staley Memorial Gardens in Americus, Georgia. Survivors include her adored and precious daughter, little Miss Zuri E. Bridges of Americus, Georgia, her loving and devoted mother, Mrs. Carolyn Davis Brown of Americus, Georgia, and her beloved and caring father, Mr. Silas Bullard of Americus, Georgia, her beloved sister, Mrs. Crystal Stokes, and her husband, Mr. Benford Stokes of Americus, Georgia, a beloved brother, Mr. Corey Davis of Sandy Springs, Georgia, her beloved aunts and uncles, Mrs. Ernestine Maddox and her husband, Mr. George Maddox of Albany, Georgia, Mrs. Ruby Harris and her husband, Mr. Mike Harris of Americus, Georgia, Mrs. Donna Holly and her husband, Mr. Pete Holly of East Hartford, Connecticut, Mrs. Deborah Spence of Hartford, Connecticut, Miss Teresa Davis of East Hartford, Connecticut, Mrs. Annie Ruth Toops, Mrs. Geneva Mays and her husband, Mr. Roy Mays, and Mrs. Bobby Jean McCoy and her husband, Mr. Robert McCoy, all of Americus, Georgia, Mrs. Mary Ann Bullock, Mrs. Shirley Reeves and her husband, Ben Reeves, and Mr. John Henry Bullock and his wife, Mrs. Mary Bullock, all of Edenton, Georgia, Mrs. Mary Lois Bullock of Seattle, Washington, Mr. Paul Bullock and his wife, Mrs. Pat Bullock of Conyers, Georgia, Mr. Willie Bullock and his wife, Mrs. Jeanette Bullock of Decatur, Georgia, Mr. Willie Lewis Bullock of Seattle, Washington, and Mr. Willie Joe Price and his wife, Mrs. Lily Price of Decatur, Georgia, a niece and nephew whom she considered as her own children, Ms. Andriana Stokes and Mr. Adolpha Stokes, both of Americus, Georgia, her godmother, Mrs. Janie Sims, her goddaughter, Miss Chastity Williams of Americus, Georgia, little Zori's godmother, Miss Demetra Slade Little of Warner Robins, Georgia, a host of cousins to include 3 loving and devoted cousins, Miss Trudy Maddox, Mr. Travis Maddox, and Mr. Charles Jones, a host of other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Miss Cavisa Wivette Davis, age 42, of 105 Peachtree Street, Americus, Georgia. Mr. Leroy Mitchell, age 62, of 1617 Rainbow Drive, Cordele, Georgia, died Wednesday, April 6, 2022, at Atrium Navison Health in Macon, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Leroy Mitchell, age 62, was held Saturday, April 16, at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Portico in Cordele, Georgia. The Reverend Donnie R. Hall Sr. officiated. The burial followed at the Fort Early Baptist Church Cemetery in Warwick, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Adeline Mitchell of Cordele, Georgia, his loving and devoted children, Mr. Lee Andrew Brown, Miss Latasha N. Brown, Mr. Antonio D. Brown, Mr. Octavius M. Brown, Miss Yatoria N. Brown, Mrs. Maquita R. Paulin, Mr. Quatavius Brown, Mr. Henry Brown, Miss Tanisha Brown, Mr. Rostavian Brown, and Miss Jasmine Brown. 14 beloved grandchildren. A beloved sister, Miss Leila Westbrook of Cordele, Georgia. His beloved brothers, Mr. Willie J. Mitchell and Mr. Troy Carter, both of Cordele, Georgia, and Mr. Pete Mitchell and his wife, Mrs. Marie Mitchell of Florida. A host of devoted nieces and nephews to include Mr. Ellis Porter of Oakfield, Georgia. A host of cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Leroy Mitchell, age 62, of 1617 Rainbow Drive, Cordele, Georgia. Mr. Calvin Lamar Glenn, age 45, of 510 East 13th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Saturday, April 9th at the Phoebe Sumter Medical Center in Americus, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Calvin Lamar Glenn, age 45, was held Saturday, April 16th at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Portico in Cordele, Georgia. The Reverend Isaac H. Owens, pastor of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, officiated. The burial followed at the Vienna City Cemetery in Vienna, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted parents, Mr. Judge and Mrs. Tommy Glenn of Cordele, Georgia. His beloved sisters, Mrs. Nebby Cross and her husband, Mr. Henry Cross of Cordele, Georgia. Mrs. Crystal Morrell and her husband, Mr. Robert Morrell of Vienna, Georgia. His beloved brothers, Mr. Charles Glenn of Cordele, Georgia. Mr. Preston Glenn and his wife, Mrs. Felicia Glenn, and Mr. Willie Mike Glenn and his wife, Mrs. Kawanda Glenn of Atlanta, Georgia. Mr. Joseph Glenn and his wife, Mrs. Mary Glenn of Cordele, Georgia. One beloved uncle, Mr. Otis James Blanks, and his wife, Mrs. Mary Frances Blanks, and Mr. Jesse James Blanks Sr., both of Cordele, Georgia. Three beloved aunt, Mrs. Louise Quarterman, Mrs. Elnora Cross, and Pastor Rosa Sanford and her husband, Elder Billy Sanford, all of Cordele, Georgia. A host of devoted nieces, great-nieces, nephews, great-nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Calvin Lamar Glenn, age 45, of 510 East 13th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia. Mr. Jamie Lee Collins, age 51, of Jacksonville, Florida, formerly of Cordele, Georgia, died Saturday, April 9th in Jacksonville, Florida. The funeral service for Mr. Jamie Lee Collins, age 51, was held Saturday, April 16th at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Portico in Cordele, Georgia. Overseer Annie Reynolds officiated. The burial followed at the Hardshell Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include his wife, Mrs. Ruth Renee Collins of Jacksonville, Florida. His loving and devoted children, Miss Kenya Whitehead of Cordele, Georgia, Miss Shanika Collins of Beaufort, South Carolina, Miss King of Cordele, Georgia, Mr. James L. Collins, Jr. of Anniston, Alabama, and Mr. Jamal Collins of Jacksonville, Florida. 10 beloved grandchildren, his loving and devoted sisters, Ms. Nancy Butler of Cordele, Georgia, Miss Jody Pate of Warner Robins, Georgia, Miss Cassandra Collins and Mrs. Betty Jean Montfrey, both of Cordele, Georgia, Miss Salita Montfrey of North Carolina, his beloved brothers, Mr. Randy Johnson and his wife, Mrs. Heath Johnson, and Mr. Aaron Collins and his wife, Mrs. Barbara Collins, both of Jacksonville, Florida, Mr. Floyd Montfrey of North Carolina, and Mr. John D. Montfrey of California. His beloved aunts and uncles, Mrs. Mary Pounds, Mrs. Rosa Ford, and Deacon Sammy Lee Montfrey and his wife, Mrs. Fanny Montfrey, all of Cordele, Georgia. Mrs. Elnora Montfrey of Atlanta, Georgia. His beloved nieces and nephew, Mr. Courtney McGriff, Mr. Jamie Collins, Mr. Ormar Sims, Mrs. Andrea Fullwood, Mr. Camden McGriff, Miss Camilla Coleman, Mr. Kelvin Collins, Miss Desiree Edwards, Mr. Bernard Butler, Mr. Alex Coleman, Miss Candace Butler, Miss Latasha Porter, Mr. Christopher Felton, Miss Demetri Collins, Mr. Christopher Johnson, Miss Adrian Rawls, Mr. Randy Redding, Mr. Eddie D. Rawls, and Miss Brittany Collins. A host of devoted cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Jamie Lee Collins, age 51, of Jacksonville, Florida, formerly of Cordele, Georgia. Again, the family of beloved retired educator, Mrs. Gladys Harris Foster of Cordele, Georgia, the family of Mr. Joe Lewis Farm of Elko, Georgia, the family of Deacon Samuel Mills of McDonald, Georgia, The family of Miss Cavisa Wavette Davis of Americus, Georgia. The family of Mr. Leroy Mitchell of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Calvin Lamar Glenn of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Jamie Lee Collins of Cordele, Georgia, would like to thank their many friends for all of the many kindnesses shown to them during the hours of sorrow and bereavement during the past week. May God bless each of you, is their prayer. The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors serving Cordele and Vienna were in charge of each of these arrangements during the past week. And now, it is certainly with the deepest regret that we make the following announcement. Mr. John C. Law, Jr., age 85, of 360 New Street, Roberta, Georgia, died Tuesday, April 12, 2022, at his residence in Roberta, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted daughters, Miss Nadine Law and Miss Danielle Law, his beloved grandsons, Mr. Travis A. Law and Mr. Jasmine Bell, 3 great-grandchildren, his caring sibling, Mr. Fred Law Sr., and his wife, Mrs. Mary Law, and Mrs. Doretha Law Thompson, a beloved and devoted niece, Mrs. Gloria M. Hurd, a beloved nephew, Mr. F. Bernard Hard, several foster children, a host of nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. John C. Law, Jr., age 85, of 360 New Street, Roberta, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. John C. Law, Jr., age 85, will be held Friday, April 22nd at 11 a.m. at the Ceres Independent Church in Mussolini, Georgia. The pastor, Reverend Samuel Chester, will officiate. The burial will follow at the Forest Chapel Church Cemetery in Pinehurst, Georgia. The public viewing will be Thursday, April 21st from 12 until 5 p.m. at the Ceres Independent Church in Mussolini, Georgia. Mr. Myron Trice, age 72, of 202 South 8th Street, Cordele, Georgia, died Thursday, April 14th, at his residence in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Demetria Trice of Cordele, Georgia, his loving and devoted children, Miss Samantha Trice and Mrs. Sumitra Trice, both of Cordele, Georgia, Mrs. Antoinette Merritt and her husband, Mr. Tony Merritt of Jacksonville, Florida, and Miss Lucille Trice of Columbus, Georgia. His caring sibling, Mr. James Trice, and his wife, Mrs. Lucy Trice, Mrs. Bernice Pittman and her husband, Mr. Freddie Pittman, Mr. Jamian Trice, and Mr. Ernest Trice, all of Cordele, Georgia. Mr. Isaiah Walker and his wife, Mrs. Linda Walker, Macon, Georgia. Mrs. Minnie Mitchell of Savannah, Georgia. Mrs. Agnes Stubbs and her husband, Mr. Eddie Stubbs of Stockbridge, Georgia. And Mrs. Dolores Byram and her husband, Mr. Cecil Byram of Titusville, Florida. His beloved aunts and uncles, Mrs. Mary Kendrick and Mrs. Linda Kendrick, both of Sylvester, Georgia. Mr. Sonny Beaton and his wife, Mrs. Melville Beaton of Macon, Georgia. A host of devoted nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Myron Trice, age 72, of 202 South 8th Street, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Myron Trice, age 72, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. Mr. Irvin Young, age 53, of 401 North 5th Street, Vienna, Georgia, died Friday, April 15th at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Shanteria Young of Vienna, Georgia. His loving and devoted children, Mr. Irvin Young and Miss Kahari Young, both of Cordele, Georgia. His beloved stepchildren, Miss Anna Adams of Vienna, Georgia, Mrs. Key Shaw Adams, and Mr. Jordan Adams, both of Albany, Georgia, and Miss Bianca Adams of Cordele, Georgia. Two beloved grandchildren, his beloved brothers and sisters, Mr. Joe Eddie Young and his wife, Mrs. Amy Young of Albany, Georgia, Miss Glenda Young of Cordele, Georgia, Miss Laura Young of Warwick, Georgia, Mrs. Debbie Young and her husband, Mr. Alonzo Young, and Miss Terry Young Hardrick and her husband, Mr. Curtis Hardrick of Vienna, Georgia. Mr. Murray Young and his wife, Mrs. Kathy Young, and Mr. Lonnie Young and his wife, Mrs. Gay Young of Cordele, Georgia. A host of devoted nieces and nephews, his beloved aunts and uncles, many cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Irvin Young, age 53, of 401 North 5th Street, Vienna, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Irvin Young, age 53, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. The J.W. Williams funeral directors serving Cordele and Vienna are in charge of each of these arrangements during this week. Friends, that conclude our funeral notices for this morning. And as always, we do remind you concerning our pre-funeral arrangements planning available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home, with packages available with a single pay, a 3-year pay, a 5-year pay, and a 10-year pay. So please stop by and talk with us concerning your pre-funeral arrangements needs available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. And also whole life insurance is available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home.
Morning worship service at 9:45 a.m. You may join them via conference call by calling 253-993-3761 for worship service. Pastor Johnny Dean and the members of New Poplar Spring extend you a cordial invitation to worship with them. Christ Chapel, Unadilla, Georgia, and Middle Georgia Community Food Bank will have a food distribution day on Friday, April 22nd at 11 o'clock a.m. at the PNC Bank in Unadilla. Christ Chapel Unadilla weekly food pantry is open every Saturday from 9 a.m. until 12 o'clock noon. Mrs. Jeanette Taylor is the pastor relief trainer. Everyone is invited to worship with the Ebenezer Baptist Church today during their morning worship hour, which will begin at 11 o'clock a.m. You may join them in person for the in-person worship service this morning, beginning at 11 o'clock a.m. Deacon Morris McClendon is the chairman of deacons. Reverend Samuel Stokes is the pastor. The Greater Mars Tabernacle Baptist Church conference call schedule is as follows. Today, the Greater Mars family will be celebrating beginning at 9 o'clock a.m. this morning. They will be in observance of the church's 118th anniversary and the 31st anniversary of their beloved pastor, Reverend Dr. K.M. Williams. Everyone has a cordial invitation to join them on their Facebook Live service, which begins at 9 o'clock a.m. The Reverend Dr. R.O. Calhoun of Albany, Georgia, will be the guest speaker. They will continue with their services Tuesday midday prayer conference at 12 o'clock noon, Thursday prayer meeting and Bible study is held at 6 o'clock p.m. The call-in number for the conference call is 229-329-7611. Mother Lucille Shays is the church mother. Deacon Arthur L. Park is the chairman of deacons. Reverend Dr. K.M. Williams is the pastor. The St. King Baptist Church invites everyone to worship with them during their worship hour. You have a cordial invitation to join them. Reverend Woody Burnham is the pastor. The Mount Zion First African Baptist Church conference call schedule for Sunday morning is at 10 o'clock a.m. Prayer Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 12 o'clock noon. Bible study is held each Wednesday at 5 o'clock p.m. Deacon Joe Wedges is the chairman of deacons. Dr. Dan James III is the pastor. You have a cordial invitation to worship with the New Oak Grove Baptist Church during their worship hour, which begins this morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Everyone has a cordial invitation to be a part of the worship services this morning at the New Oak Grove Baptist Church. Deacon Alonzo Jones is the chairman of deacons. Reverend W.W. Wilson is the pastor. The Gethsemane Baptist Church extends you a cordial invitation to worship with them this morning, beginning at 10:30 a.m. as they will be celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Your presence will be highly appreciated, and we will be back. They will be back in this sanctuary for worship service. Reverend Cecil Straughter is the pastor. The Brown Chapel New Beginning International Outreach Church of Cordele Church and Pastor Anniversary will climax today, Sunday, April 17th at 12 o'clock noon with in-house worship. Everyone is invited to attend. Face masks are required. Chaplain Pastor L.B. Hicks is the pastor. Tri-Stone Bible Study Church of Americas invites everyone to worship with them each Sunday from 10 a.m. until 11 o'clock a.m. Minister Ward is the minister. The McAfee Grove Baptist Church, located Highway 19 North in Leesburg, invites everyone to worship with them during their family night on Tuesday at 7 o'clock p.m., small class studies on Thursday at 7 o'clock p.m., and Sunday morning worship at 9 o'clock a.m. And you may join them using the call-in number 425-436-6341. Reverend Dr. Robert L. Morgan Sr. is the pastor. The Fort Valley State University Chris County Head Start and Early Head Start are now accepting applications for the 2022-23 school year. If you are interested, please visit our Head Start Center located at 1110 South 12th Street or our Early Head Start located at 615 West 15th Avenue to pick up an application and to discuss items needed for the registration. If you have any questions prior to your visit, feel free to contact Ms. Keandria Towns or Ms. Laquita Jenwright for Head Start by calling 229-276-9880 or Ms. Shayla Askew for Early Head Start at 229-273-7452. The Hope for the City Scholarship Program 2022 applications are being accepted and must be in by May 15, 2022. Two $1,500 scholarships will be awarded. To qualify, you must be a Crisp County High School senior, must plan to attend college in the fall of 2022. For more information, please contact Mr. Nicholas Morgan at 229-917-8511 or Mr. Vidal Stretchin at 410-404-5327. Everyone has a cordial invitation to worship with the Mount Calvary Baptist Church today. You may join us at Facebook Live beginning at 10:30 a.m. for our Resurrection Sunday worship service. Each of you have a cordial invitation to attend. Also this afternoon at 4 o'clock p.m. on the grounds of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, there will be Sounds on the Grounds, a gospel program where you are welcome to bring your chairs and just join in the worship on the grounds of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church. This program will begin at 4 o'clock p.m. Deacon Leon Spears is the chairman of deacons. Reverend Isaac H. Owens is the pastor. This will conclude our announcements for this morning.
And now for dedication. Our first
Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following. Happy wedding anniversary to our dear friend and brother, Deacon Lorenzo Ren Montfrey and his beloved wife, Sister Sharon Montfrey, who are celebrating their 41st wedding anniversary today, April 17. Dedication requested by their beloved mother, Mrs. Otha Simmons, and the entire Montfrey family, along with the members of the Crossroad Baptist Church and family, the Reverend Nelson Maynard, pastor, and Deacon Jimmy Charles Montfrey, chairman of deacons, all says happy wedding anniversary to their own Deacon Lorenzo Ren Montfrey and Sister Sharon Montfrey on today. God bless your union and keep it strong. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following. Happy birthday to our own Mrs. Cynthia Lattimore, who celebrated her birthday on Saturday, April 16. Dedication requested by her husband, her children, and family, and the staff of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. I'll say happy birthday to Mrs. Cynthia Lattimore. Happy birthday and many, many more. Happy birthday to the Reverend Willie James Felton, who celebrated his birthday on Saturday, April 16. Dedication requested by his beloved wife, his children, grandchildren, and the entire Felton family, as well as members of the Zion Hope Baptist Church, the Reverend Willie James Felton. Happy birthday to Mr. Tashawn Lattimore, who is celebrating his birthday today, April 17. Dedication requested by his beloved parents and the entire family. Happy birthday to Deacon Eddie Byram, chairman of the Board of Deacons of the Spring Hill Baptist Church, who is celebrating his birthday today, April 17. Dedication requested by his beloved sisters and brothers and the members of the Spring Hill Baptist Church. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following: Deacon James Smith and family, Deacon Lawrence and Sister Gwendolyn Williams and family of Leslie, Georgia, and their beloved mother, the Billingsley family, to Dr. and Mrs. Brandon Williams, Assistant Superintendent of the Chris County Board of Education, to Miss Cheryl Cobb Henry and family of Americas, Georgia, Deacon Bob Hughes and family, Deacon Joey Clark and family, and Deacon Oscar Cooks, chairman of the Board of Deacons of the Friendship Baptist Church of DeSoto, Georgia, to the members there, the Fuller family and the Mercer family, to Mrs. Gloria Walker and family, and the members of the Marthana Living Way of Christ Church of DeSoto, Georgia. Our first selection goes out to Mrs. Willie Mae Crapp and family, Miss Willie Mae Leary and family of Hatley, Georgia, the entire Leary and Carter family, Miss Vivian Fullwood and family, Mother Lenora McNeil and family, Deacon Wallace and Mrs. Patty Relaford and family, Ms. Latasha Moore and family, Mrs. Martha Ruth Westbrook and family of Araby, Georgia, Mrs. Hazel Daniels and family, the Reverend Joseph Atkins and family, the Reverend Lorinda Ray and the entire Ray family, Mother Lucinda Ray and family. Our first selection this morning goes out to Mother Julia Turner and family, Mr. and Mrs. Julius Dariso and family, Mrs. Mary Lee Holmes and family, Mr. Robert Brown and family, Mr. Willie B. Robinson and family, Mother May Frances Maynard and family, Mother Evelyn B. Towns, Mother Evelyn B. Lewis and family. Our first selection this morning goes out to Mrs. Neffie Harvey and family, Deacon Lonnie Clayton family, Mrs. Ida B. Waters and family, Ms. Maddie Mays and family, the Reverend Joel Butts and family, Mother Grace Patrick and family, Mr. George and Mrs. Josephine Lawrence and family, Mrs. Anna Ruth Jordan and family, Vienna, Georgia, Mrs. Mary Frances Davis and family, Miss Thelma Brown and family, Miss Burrow Patrick and family, Mother Willie McGill and family, Mrs. Debbie Cross and family, Mrs. Tommy Glenn and family, Mr. Judge Glenn and family, and the entire Glenn family, Mr. Justin Corbin Jr. and family, Mrs. Loretta Fields and family, Mrs. Naisha Davis and family, Mr. and Mrs. A.B. Levant and family, Deacon and Mrs. Norman Fields and family, Mr. and Mrs. Danny Jackson and family, Mother Minnie Fletcher and family, Mother Ida Bell Patrick and entire Patrick and Wellens family, Mrs. Geraldine Pickens and family, Mrs. Geraldine Harvey and family, Mrs. Jackie Lattimore and family, Mrs. Vivian Daniels and family, Mrs. Lottie Tarbert and family, Mr. Don and Miss Cynthia White and family, Mrs. Kidera Lane and family, Mr. William and Mrs. Brenda Jones and family, Mr. Keith and Mrs. Kara Dexter and family. Our first selection this morning goes out to my neighbor, Mrs. Theron Jones and family, and the entire Jones and Tarbert family, Mother Dorothy Tarbert and family, Deacon and Mrs. John Stubbs and family, Brother Johnny and Sister Juanita Tarbert and family. It is certainly with the deepest regret that we make the following announcements. Mr. John C. Law Jr. age 85, of 360 New Street, Roberta, Georgia, died Tuesday, April 12, 2022, at his residence in Roberta, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. John C. Law Jr. will be held Friday, April 22nd at 11 a.m. at the Ceres Independent Church in Mussolini, Georgia. The pastor, Reverend Samuel Chester, will officiate. The burial will follow at the Forest Chapel Church Cemetery in Pinehurst, Georgia. The public viewing will be Thursday, April 21st from 12 until 5 p.m. at the Ceres Independent Church. Mr. Myron Trice, age 72, of 202 South 8th Street, Cordele, Georgia, died Thursday, April 14th at his residence in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Myron Trice, age 72, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. Mr. Irvin Young, age 53, of 401 North 5th Street, Vienna, Georgia, died Friday, April 15th at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Irvin Young, age 53, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors serving Cordele and Vienna are in charge of each of these arrangements during this week. This selection this morning is dedicated to the bereaved families whose loved ones were laid to rest during the past week. The family of beloved retired educator, Mrs. Gladys Harris Foster of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Joe Lewis Farm of Elko, Georgia. The family of Deacon Samuel Mills of McDonald, Georgia. The family of Miss Calvisa Wivette Davis of Americus, Georgia. The family of Mr. Leroy Mitchell of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Calvin Lamar Glenn of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Jamie Lee Collins of Jacksonville, Florida, and Cordele, Georgia. This selection is dedicated to the bereaved families whose loved ones will be laid to rest during this week. The family of Mr. John C. Law Jr. of Roberta, Georgia. The family of Mr. Myron Trice of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Irvin Young of Vienna, Georgia. This selection is dedicated to all of the sick and shut-in, to all patients in the local and surrounding hospitals, nursing homes, and rehabilitation centers, to our beloved ministers and their devoted family members, to all retired educators, to the men and women serving in our armed forces, both stateside and abroad, to all veterans, and to everyone who listens to our program on each Sunday morning. It's a pleasure for us to bring it to you. Our program goes out in memory of our past president, Dr. Napoleon Williams, goes out to my wife, Mrs. Calandra Wilkerson Parker, to my son, Jai Wilkerson Parker, who turned 15th on April the 15th on Friday of this past week. So say happy birthday to Jai Wilkerson Parker, who turned 15 on Friday. That was Friday, April the 15th. And this selection goes out to my mother-in-law, Mrs. Billy Ann Hall and family, to my brother, retired Chief Master Sergeant Norman F. Dexter, to his wife, Dr. Gwendolyn Maxine Dexter, and their grandson, Noble. The selection goes out to my sisters, Miss Mattie Mae Johnson, better known as Sister Girl, and Mrs. Patsy Jackson and her husband, Mr. Jim Jackson of Cordele, Georgia. The selection goes out to my nephew, Deacon Kenneth Smith, program chairman of the Greater Morris Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church, and to our pastor, Dr. K.M. Williams, again, who celebrates on today's 31st anniversary at the Greater Morris Tabernacle Baptist Church as pastor, and the church anniversary there. So our program goes out to all of the members of the Greater Morris Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church, Deacon Tommy Ford, chairman, his mother, Lucille Shazer, church mother of the church, Sister Mary Henderson, assistant church mother, Deacon S. Cassandra Jackson, Deacon S. president, and to all of the members of the Greater Morris Tabernacle Baptist Church, thanks for your love and your devotion to the Church of God over the years there. So celebrate today, 9 a.m. Invite you to worship with the Greater Morris Tabernacle Baptist Church today. Again, our program goes out to each and every one who listens to our program. Goes out to Mr. Cleveland R. Lemon, oldest staff member of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home and steward of the Bethel CME Church here in Cordele, Georgia. The selection goes out to Mrs. Aletha Askew, church clerk of the New Oak Grove Baptist Church of Cordele, Georgia. Our selection goes out to Mrs. Easter May Sanders and to Mrs. Annette Felton and Mr. George Felton and the entire family. And again, to each and everyone who listens to our program on each Sunday morning, it's a pleasure for us to bring it to you. God bless you and happy Easter. Yes, I'm old enough to say Easter. Happy Easter to each and every one of you and this blessed Resurrection Day. God bless you.
Thank you for joining us this morning. We hope you've enjoyed our program. Tune in again on next Sunday morning. Remember, in your time of need, contact the competent, capable, and dependable staff at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home.
Some of these days.